Emily Carter stood frozen, heart pounding, her hands gripping the microphone stand. The spotlight burned down on her, but the cold laughter from the audience stung even more. They expected her to fail. They wanted her to fail. The cold morning air bit at Emily Carter's skin as she pulled her thin jacket tighter around her small frame. The streets of Brooklyn were alive with the chaotic hum of city life. Horns blaring, people rushing past, coffee shops spilling warmth and rich aromas onto the sidewalk. Emily, however, had no time to enjoy any of it. Her stomach growled in protest. Breakfast had been nothing more than a slice of stale bread and a sip of water. She quickened her pace toward Westwood High, gripping the worn-out straps of her faded backpack. The school loomed ahead, a grand, red brick building with towering glass windows that reflected the gray winter sky. Inside, it was a different world. Students in designer shoes and branded coats clustered in groups, their laughter filling the wide, polished hallways. Emily kept her head down, avoiding eye contact. She had learned to navigate the social hierarchy of Westwood, where wealth dictated popularity, and those like her were invisible at best, humiliated at worst. She reached her locker, struggling with the rusted latch. Just as she got it open, a sneering voice pierced the air. Well, look who decided to show up in those same rags again." Emily stiffened. Madison Sinclair, the queen bee of Westwood High. Tall, blonde, and effortlessly cruel, Madison always found new ways to make Emily's life miserable. Behind her, a small crowd of students chuckled, eagerly waiting for the show to begin. Emily forced herself to ignore them, focusing on the crumpled textbooks inside her locker. "Oh, come on," Madison continued, flipping her flawless hair over her shoulder. "You could at least pretend to have some dignity. Or, wait, does your family even know what that is?" Laughter erupted around them. Emily felt her face heat up, but she bit her tongue. Reacting would only make things worse. "She probably digs through the garbage for clothes," another voice chimed in. It was Ashley Carter, Madison's best friend and loyal sidekick. "Or maybe a thrift store." "Oh wait, even thrift stores have standards." The group erupted in cruel giggles, their perfectly manicured nails covering their smirks. Emily swallowed hard, gripping her books tightly. She wished she could disappear. Then, from behind, a soft voice spoke up. "Leave her alone." Emily turned in surprise. Noah Bennett, tall, quiet, with stormy gray eyes and a reputation for keeping to himself. He wasn't part of the popular crowd, but he was respected. And now he was standing up for her? Madison rolled her eyes. "Oh, how noble, Noah. Defending the charity case. You want to be her prince or something?" Noah's jaw tightened. "Maybe I just don't get entertainment from bullying people." The hallway fell silent. Madison's smirk faltered for a second before she scoffed and turned away. "Whatever. She's not worth my time anyway." With a flick of her wrist, she strutted off, her minions following close behind. Emily exhaled a shaky breath. She turned to Noah, searching for words. "Thank you." He nodded, giving her a small, reassuring smile before walking away. The first bell rang, and Emily forced herself to focus. Another day of being at the bottom of the social ladder. But she had survived worse. What she didn't know was that everything was about to change. All because of one unexpected moment on a stage. Later that afternoon, Emily sat in the back of the school auditorium, clutching her notebook to her chest. She wasn't supposed to be here, not really. The annual Westwood Talent Showcase was the biggest event of the year, a platform where the wealthiest and most gifted students flaunted their talents. Singers, dancers, and musicians were scattered across the stage, rehearsing under the watchful eyes of Mrs. Kensington, the drama teacher. The grand piano gleamed under the soft glow of the overhead lights, and the sound system was worth more than Emily's entire apartment. She hadn't planned on watching the rehearsals, but something had drawn her here. Maybe it was the longing to be part of something bigger than herself. On stage, Madison Sinclair stood at the microphone, her voice sugary sweet as she chatted with her clique. "I mean, let's be real, guys," she said loudly, making sure the whole auditorium could hear. "This year's show is practically mine. No one else has the stage presence. Ashley smirked. And the voice. Don't forget that. Madison beamed. Obviously. Emily sighed, gripping her notebook tighter. She had always loved to sing. It was the one place she felt free, where her struggles melted away into melodies. But talent meant nothing without opportunity. And in a school like Westwood, opportunity only came to those who could afford it. Just as she was about to slip out unnoticed, Mrs. Kensington's voice rang through the auditorium. Before we wrap up, we have one final audition slot open. Is there anyone else who'd like to participate? Silence. Madison laughed. Well, of course not. Who would even? I'll do it. The words were out before Emily could stop them. The entire room turned toward her. Madison's eyebrows shot up. Wait, what? Emily's throat went dry. She felt every pair of eyes lock onto her, disbelief thick in the air. What had she just done? Mrs. Kensington adjusted her glasses, intrigued. Emily Carter? Emily swallowed hard. It was too late to back down now. Yes, I'd like to audition. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. Madison whispered something to Ashley, barely suppressing a smirk. Mrs. Kensington, however, simply nodded. All right, Emily. The stage is yours. Emily's legs felt like lead as she forced herself forward, ascending the steps one by one. Her heart pounded against her ribs. This was a mistake. A huge mistake. She reached the microphone, feeling the heat of judgment from every corner of the room. The auditorium, which had felt so vast from the seats, now felt suffocating. Emily took a deep breath. You can do this. She closed her eyes and let the first note escape her lips. The moment the sound filled the room, everything changed. Emily's voice started out soft, uncertain, as if she were testing the weight of her own courage. A few muffled snickers echoed in the auditorium, but as she reached the first chorus, something changed. Her voice grew stronger, weaving through the air like a thread of raw emotion. Every word carried years of struggle. Every note held unspoken dreams. It was a voice not just of talent, but of survival, one that refused to be ignored. A hush fell over the room. Even Madison, who had been poised to laugh, froze mid-whisper. Emily's eyes remained shut as she lost herself in the music. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't just the poor girl. She was heard. By the time she sang the final note, silence gripped the auditorium. A moment stretched between her and the crowd, filled with something unspoken. Then, a single clap. Emily's eyes fluttered open. Noah Bennett stood at the edge of the stage, applauding. One by one, more students joined in. The claps turned into cheers, whistles, a wave of unexpected admiration. Emily's chest rose and fell as she tried to process what had just happened. They liked it. They actually liked it. But not everyone did. From the front row, Madison sat stone-faced, her fingers curled tightly around her phone. The thunderous applause wasn't for her, and she hated it. Mrs. Kensington's voice rang out over the crowd. Well, that was remarkable. She adjusted her glasses, studying Emily with new interest. You have an incredible voice, Emily. I'd like to officially add you to the performance lineup for the showcase. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Wait, really? Mrs. Kensington smiled. Absolutely. Your talent deserves to be seen. The moment should have been perfect. But from the corner of her eye, Emily saw the dark glare that Madison shot her way. Something told her this wasn't over. The next morning, Emily stepped into school with a strange mixture of pride and dread. The performance had changed something. People were noticing her. Some even offered words of encouragement as she passed by. But with the attention came the inevitable backlash. Seriously. Madison's voice rang out as Emily reached her locker. She sings one song, and suddenly she thinks she belongs here? Emily clenched her jaw. She had expected this. She wouldn't let Madison get to her. But Madison wasn't done. Oh, come on, she scoffed, her voice loud enough for nearby students to hear. Do we really think she deserves a spot in the talent showcase? I mean, shouldn't we give the stage to someone who actually represents Westwood High? A few students shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Madison's influence was too strong. Emily turned to face her, keeping her voice steady. The audition was open to everyone. I earned my spot. Madison smirked. Sure. And I'm sure the judges weren't just feeling sorry for you. A ripple of laughter followed. Emily's fingers tightened around her books, but before she could respond, a voice cut through the tension. Madison, that's enough. Noah. He stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You're acting like the showcase is some exclusive club. It's about talent. Emily proved she has it. Madison's eyes narrowed. I was the star of this showcase. And now, because of her, I'm sharing the spotlight with a charity case. Emily swallowed hard. There it was again, that word. She took a shaky breath, locking eyes with Madison. I don't need charity. Her voice didn't waver. And I'm not taking anyone's spotlight. If you're really the star, you shouldn't be afraid of a little competition. The students around them murmured in response, impressed by Emily's boldness. Even Noah's lips twitched as if suppressing a smirk. Madison's face flushed red. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. But as Emily walked away, she knew Madison wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. And she was right. The night before the talent showcase, Emily stayed late at school for rehearsal. The auditorium was empty, except for Mrs. Kensington making last-minute adjustments to the lineup. Emily stood center stage, letting herself breathe in the space. Tomorrow she'd stand here again, but in front of a full crowd. This was her moment. She gathered her things, ready to leave, when she noticed something strange. The microphone stand was slightly off balance. Frowning, she adjusted it. That's when she saw the damage. The base of the microphone cord had been cut, barely hanging on by a few strands. If she had tried to perform with it tomorrow, it would have disconnected mid-song. Emily's stomach twisted. She didn't need to guess who was behind this. She turned on her heel and marched straight to the parking lot. Madison and her clique were leaning against her father's luxury car, laughing over their phones. The second Madison saw Emily storming toward her, she smirked. Well, look who's here. Emily didn't waste time. You messed with my mic. Madison feigned innocence. I have no idea what you're talking about. Emily's hands curled into fists. You're afraid, aren't you? Her voice didn't waver. Afraid that someone without your money, your popularity, or your privilege might actually outshine you. Madison's expression hardened, her fake smile vanishing. Let me tell you something, Emily continued. You can break my mic. You can mock me. You can try to humiliate me. But you won't take this from me. I'm going to sing tomorrow. And whether you like it or not, people are going to listen. For the first time, Madison had nothing to say. Emily turned and walked away, her heart pounding. She had fought her whole life to be heard. And tomorrow, nothing, not even Madison Sinclair, was going to silence her. The night of the Westwood Talent Showcase had finally arrived. The grand auditorium buzzed with energy, packed with students, parents, and faculty. The stage, illuminated by dazzling spotlights, cast long shadows across the polished wooden floor. This was it, the moment that would define Emily Carter's place in this world. Backstage, Emily could hear the performances unfolding one by one. Dancers twirled, pianists played intricate melodies, and singers filled the room with confident voices. But none of them carried the weight of what Emily was about to do. She adjusted the microphone stand, now securely fixed after Mrs. Kensington had been notified of the sabotage attempt. Madison had denied everything, of course, but the damage was done. Everyone knew someone had tried to silence Emily, and Emily knew exactly who. She didn't care. She wouldn't be silenced. Noah appeared beside her, his expression unreadable. Nervous, Emily exhaled shakily. Terrified, he gave her a rare, small smile. Good. That means it matters. She nodded, feeling a strange sense of steadiness settle in her chest. Then, from the other side of the curtain, Madison's voice echoed through the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. As you all know, this showcase is a time-honored tradition at Westwood High. A stage for the best of the best. She paused, letting the words sink in before adding, "And up next, we have someone a little unexpected." The crowd murmured. Emily's stomach twisted. Madison continued, her voice dripping with sugar-coated venom. "Let's give a warm welcome to our underdog, Emily Carter." Polite applause followed, but Emily could hear the underlying doubt in the audience. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Madison was trying to shake her, trying to remind everyone that she didn't belong here. But she did. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The auditorium fell silent as Emily approached the microphone. For a split second, doubt clawed at her. What if she failed? What if she proved Madison right? Then she saw her mother, sitting near the back, in a seat Emily knew she could barely afford. Her mother's eyes shone with pride. That was all Emily needed. She gripped the microphone, closed her eyes and sang. The first note was soft but steady. It carried through the silence like a whisper of defiance. Then came the next, and the next, building into something powerful, something undeniable. Emotion poured out of her. Every lyric held the weight of being overlooked. Every melody carried the pain of being mocked, of feeling unworthy. But more than that, it carried something greater. She sang for every kid who had ever been told they weren't good enough. For every dreamer who was too poor, too different, too invisible. She sang for herself. The audience sat frozen, spellbound. Madison, watching from the wings, looked like she had swallowed glass. This wasn't just a good performance, it was something bigger, something real. By the time Emily hit the final note, the entire auditorium was holding its breath. And then, the room erupted in cheers, a standing ovation. Emily's breath hitched as she took in the sight. They weren't just clapping. They were cheering for her. Tears burned in her eyes, but she let them fall. She had done it. She had taken the stage. And she had won. Not just against Madison, but against everything that had ever tried to keep her small. As Emily stepped off stage, Madison was waiting. Her arms were crossed, her face tight with something unreadable. Anger, embarrassment, but also something dangerously close to respect. Emily braced for the attack. But Madison just scoffed, shaking her head. "You really think this changes anything?" Emily met her gaze, calm and steady. "It already has." A flicker of something crossed Madison's face, fear. For the first time, she wasn't in control. For the first time, someone else had taken the spotlight. And then, the moment of choice. Emily could gloat. She could tear Madison down the way she had been torn down. She could win. But instead, she said, "You have a great voice, Madison." Madison blinked. Emily gave a small, knowing smile. "But you were wrong about one thing. This stage, it belongs to anyone who's brave enough to stand on it." And with that, she walked away. Because Emily Carter wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for something bigger. And she had already won. The echoes of the standing ovation still rang in Emily's ears as she stepped into the crowded backstage area. Hands clapped her on the back. Voices congratulated her. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. Noah was the first to reach her. That was insane. His usual cool demeanor cracked, revealing something close to admiration. "I knew you were good, but that was something else." Emily let out a breathless laugh, shaking her head. "I still can't believe it happened." "It didn't just happen," Noah corrected. "You made it happen." As more students approached to offer their praise, Emily noticed something unusual. Some of Madison's own friends hesitated, throwing her uncertain glances. Madison stood off to the side, arms crossed, a storm brewing behind her eyes. But there was no witty remark, no smug insult, just silence. She had lost. And for the first time, Madison Sinclair had to accept that she wasn't the center of everything. The next day at school felt different. Emily felt different. People she had never spoken to before smiled at her in the hallways. Some even stopped to say how much they loved her performance. The whisper of charity case had been replaced with something new, respect. For the first time, Emily wasn't ashamed to walk these halls. At lunch, she settled into her usual seat, still adjusting to the change. That's when Madison approached. The cafeteria went quiet. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Madison stood across from Emily's table, her expression unreadable. "You're still sitting here?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual venom. Emily met her gaze evenly. "Where else would I sit?" A tense beat of silence stretched between them. Then Madison sighed. "Look, I don't like losing," she admitted, her voice lower now. "And I don't like being wrong. But you were good. Really good." Emily blinked, surprised. Was this Madison Sinclair backtracking? "I'll admit it," Madison continued, shifting uncomfortably. "You deserved that stage." Emily studied her for a long moment. This wasn't an apology, not exactly. But for someone like Madison, this was as close as it got. Instead of gloating, Emily simply nodded. "Thanks." Madison hesitated, then rolled her eyes. "Don't let it go to your head." Then, before anyone could make a big deal out of it, she turned and walked away, flipping her hair over her shoulder. As soon as she was gone, Ashley, one of Madison's closest friends, slid into the empty seat beside Emily. "Okay, I'm just gonna say it," she whispered. "That was the weirdest thing I've ever seen." Emily let out a small laugh. "Yeah, it was." But deep down, she knew the truth. She had changed something. And maybe, just maybe, Madison had felt it too. That evening, Emily returned home to their small apartment. The air smelled of warm bread and her mother's lavender candle. "Home." Her mother looked up from the kitchen table, a beaming smile lighting up her tired face. "I saw the video," she said softly. "You were incredible." Emily sat beside her, feeling the warmth of her mother's presence. It didn't feel real. Her mother reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind Emily's ear. "It's real, sweetheart. You made it real." A comfortable silence settled between them before her mother added, "I have something for you." She pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Emily frowned, picking it up. "What is this?" "Mrs. Kensington called," her mother explained. "The Westwood Music Foundation saw your performance. They're offering you a scholarship." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "A full scholarship," her mother added, her voice thick with emotion. "For voice training, private lessons, everything you never thought you'd have." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She had spent so long believing she would never have a real chance, never be more than a girl people pitied. But now she had a future. Her mother took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You earned this, Emily." And for the first time, Emily truly believed it. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Emily let herself dream. Of music, of possibility, of a life where she wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. She had fought to be seen, to be heard. And now, she was ready for whatever came next. The days that followed felt like a dream. Emily Carter, the girl no one noticed, the girl who had been mocked, ignored, and underestimated, was now recognized, respected, seen. Her video had spread beyond Westwood High, shared on social media by students, teachers, and even local musicians. People she had never met before approached her in the halls, not out of pity, but genuine admiration. But the biggest change? It wasn't about the attention. It wasn't about Madison's reluctant respect or the scholarship. It was about her. For the first time in her life, Emily believed in herself. A week after the talent showcase, Emily found herself standing outside the Westwood Music Academy. The scholarship had covered private vocal lessons with one of the best coaches in the state, something she had once thought was impossible. As she stepped inside, a mixture of excitement and fear settled in her chest. She had won the battle at school, but this was different. These were students who had trained their entire lives, who had always belonged. What if she wasn't good enough? She was about to turn back when she felt her phone buzz. It was a text from Noah. "You're going to be amazing. Don't let them scare you." Emily exhaled, a smile tugging at her lips. For so long she had been afraid. Afraid of standing out. Afraid of failing. Afraid of proving everyone right, that she didn't belong. But not anymore. She straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked inside. Because this time, She knew she belonged. A few weeks later, Emily sat on the old swings at the park near her apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. Noah sat beside her, lazily pushing his swing back and forth. "So," he said, kicking a rock with his shoe, "how's it feel to be the school legend?" Emily snorted. "Legend? I sang one song." "Yeah," Noah said, "but you made people listen." She let his words sink in. She had spent years fading into the background. Years letting people define who she was, letting their words make her feel small. But that night on stage, that night she had spoken for herself, and people had listened. She turned to Noah. "I think I just finally understand something." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh," she smiled softly. "It was never about being good enough for them." Noah tilted his head. "Then what was it about?" Emily looked out at the sky, her heart lighter than it had ever been. "It was about being good enough for me." Emily's story wasn't just about music. It wasn't just about standing up to a bully or proving people wrong. It was about self-worth, about learning that value isn't something other people give you. It's something you claim for yourself. There will always be Madisons in the world. People who try to define you, break you, silence you. But in the end, their words don't matter. The only voice that truly matters is your own. And when you find the courage to use it, that's when the world finally listens. To anyone who has ever been told they aren't enough, who has ever felt unseen, unheard, unworthy, remember Emily's story. And remember this, you belong. Your voice matters. So step onto your stage and make them listen.